What is going on, everyone? I wanted to do a quick review of a cognitive test. And what does a cognitive test incorporate? So let's say you've had your student recently tested for a learning disability and they give you the FIE. Now, on the report, it has some different areas, but you're not sure what this means. So I wanted to explain to you what each area means for the cognitive test. So let's begin. So first, there's fluid reasoning. Now, fluid reasoning has to do a lot with math and your ability to problem solve, but it also can incorporate things such as reading and say reading comprehension and kind of inferencing and finding out that information that you're not sure of. Comprehension knowledge. Now, for comprehension knowledge, what they do is they take these tests and they norm them based upon age group. So comprehension knowledge is what you know for that age group. A lot of it will incorporate information that the average student should know at that age. So let's take vocabulary or information about a subject or a topic or an item. Are they able to describe this item? Are they able to describe this topic? Visual spatial. This means, are you a visual learner? So this has to do a lot with things such as math. And that's because we see math, we don't read math. And no, I'm not talking about math word problems. I'm talking about visual math calculations. Short-term working memory. That's the memory I'm using in the moment to work. A lot of that will incorporate information that I'm using, say, as I'm being taught the information. So let's say I'm working alongside the teacher who's modeling a division problem, and I'm working on step by step. So if I'm doing the problem as she's doing it and learning from her, that's short-term working memory. Now, the important thing about short-term working memory is I take that information and then I store it long-term to be used later on. And we'll get to long-term here in a minute. A lot of students who have ADHD also struggle with short-term working memory because of their attention. They struggle in the moment to focus. Auditory processing. This sounds like it is. It's the ability to process information audibly. So if you're listening to information, such as breaking apart words or putting words together, you may struggle with that information. You may also struggle with listening comprehension. A lot of students who struggle with auditory processing may struggle with listening comprehension. It may appear as though they're not listening. However, they're just struggling by processing that information that's being told to them. So processing speed. That's how quickly you're able to do something accurately, I would say. So if you're doing a math problem and you're working a little bit slower than that of your peers, you may struggle with processing. Long-term storage and retrieval. This is taking all the information you have learned and storing it long term. So say that you have learned the alphabet and say you've learned what each sound of the alphabet is, then you're able to use that information to help you decode when you start reading. Those who struggle with things such as that, who struggle with being able to store that information long term, may struggle with things such as decoding, or may struggle with math problems, or may even struggle with things such as writing. These all make up what's called the G factor. Now, the G factor is all these 7 areas, and we as diagnosticians use these 7 areas for a full-scale IQ test, so you'll get a full-scale IQ score. Now, I realize there's other areas that are involved, such as orthographic processing and many other areas, but we're going to mainly talk about these 7 because these are the 7 that most diagnosticians will go ahead and test for a cognitive test. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you the academic areas that we take and try to correlate with the cognitive areas. So up top, these ones you see right now so far, this is part of the cognitive test. The ones that have been color-coded below are part of the academic test. So let's take the first one, math problem solving. Math problem solving is using the example of, say, Johnny goes to the store and he buys 4 items. He has $20 and he gives it to the cashier. And then you're trying to figure out how much money Johnny has left. That's math problem solving. It's using math in real world scenarios. Math calculation, that is basically doing calculated math problems, such as if you're doing a division problem, if you're doing a multiplication problem, if you're doing addition, subtraction, if you're doing parentheses, exponents, things like that, that's math calculation. Reading comprehension. This is what it sounds like. This is, are you able to comprehend the information that you've read? Yes, we want to see if you can read it, but also, are you able to comprehend that information as well? Basic reading, that has to do a lot with decoding. And if you're able to decode the words you're reading, those who struggle with decoding and struggle with basic reading more than likely could have dyslexia. Reading fluency. Now, according to the Dyslexia Handbook, those who struggle in the area of reading fluency may also have potentially dyslexia as well. But reading fluency is, are you able to decode those words and then read them fluently, or are you kind of hung up on each word? Written expression, that is what it sounds like. Are you able to write information well? Those who struggle with things such as spelling and those who struggle with things such as sentence building and creating sentences may also struggle with written expression. Oral expression is what it sounds like. Are you able to express yourself orally, or do you struggle getting out that information? It may be inside, but you may struggle to get that information out. And the last one is very hard to see, but the last one is listening comprehension. And a lot of students who struggle in the area of listening comprehension look like they're not paying attention. However, they are. It's just a case of they're struggling to process that information as it's being told to them. It's taking them a little bit of time to process that information. So here's an example real quick. If you struggle with fluid reasoning, if say that's one area of deficit cognitively, you may also struggle with something like math. Fluid reasoning can also be related to reading comprehension. So if you struggle in that area of cognitive fluid reasoning, you may also struggle with reading comprehension as well. Visual spatial, that of course we relate that a lot to math because you have to see math in order to do math. You have to see math calculations. So visual spatial has a lot to do with math. Long-term storage and retrieval also has to do with math. Short-term working memory also has to do with math. And so these long-term and short-term, remember, you have to take information short-term to move it to the long-term. Comprehension knowledge, if you don't understand the vocabulary of certain words and don't understand their meanings, you may struggle with comprehending the overall reading process. Long-term storage and retrieval, again, that's another important one. It has to do with things such as basic reading. Like I said earlier, if you can't take that information that you've learned about what each sound makes, then you can't use that later on to decode and so on and so forth. Auditory processing, if you can't break apart words and put words back together, if you struggle with processing words and the sounds they make, you may also struggle with basic reading. Long-term storage and retrieval, again, has to do with written expression. And if you struggle taking that information of how, let's say, how words are spelled, things like that, you may struggle in written expression. So processing speed has to do with things such as reading fluency. You may be taking your time reading, but that may be because you have a deficit in processing speed. Auditory processing and written expression, that one sounds like it doesn't make sense, but if you struggle breaking apart words and putting them together, then you're also going to struggle writing those words and blending those words together on paper. Auditory processing and oral expression, and auditory processing, listening comprehension. Basically, as I was saying earlier, if you struggle with auditory processing, you're going to struggle getting things out and taking information in because you're processing the words that are being said. Now let's go ahead and look at a bell curve. A bell curve kind of tells you where the student's at in reference to other students or in reference to the range. You may see what range was that in. Or on the FIE, you may see what range did the student score in. So real quick, this 85 to around 115, or I'd say 90 to around 110 is considered your average range. Above 110 to about 120, you have the high average. And then over here, you're going to have the superior, and the very superior means you're a genius right over here. If you go below the 85, you're going to have the below average range. And the below 70 is the well below range, and then you have the extremely below range. And these are considered areas that you're really struggling in. I really hope me going over this information helps shed some light on these different 7 areas and how they make up the cognitive test and how they make up the G factor, which is one of the ways you get the full scale IQ and see what a student's full scale IQ is, and how they relate to areas of academic struggle. Again, if you see a student struggling academically, there's a potential for them to also have been struggling cognitively. And it's my job as an educational diagnostician to look at those areas of academic struggle and see if there's a relationship between those academic areas of struggle and those cognitive areas of struggle. That way I can better explain to others areas a student may struggle in and areas they need help in. Again, thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe.